Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human existence.
It's great to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Eager to get into this one. The source material you sent over, wow, it's a really rich discussion with some pretty heavy implications.
It is, and I think that's where we need to start. We're looking at this conversation between some top thinkers to try and answer a huge question. Where do we stand right now, globally?
Right. Are we on a path that we can't turn back from?
Exactly. And to do that, we have to use the lens of evolutionary biology. It's the only tool that can really assess our trajectory and maybe show us the knowledge gaps we desperately need to fill.
And that brings up the core insight from the sources, doesn't it? The duty of a scientist.
It really does. It's not just about finding things out in the lab. The real work, the real duty, is getting that information out there clearly and broadly so that everyone understands what's at stake.
If the science stays in the ivory tower, it's useless.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So let's start with the most sobering part of this. The sixth mass extinction.
Okay, let's do it. And the key difference you flag is that this one is on us. The previous 5, over nearly 5 billion years of history, were natural.
Right. Meteorites, plankton blooms, natural climate cycles. They were catastrophic, of course, but the planet's basic operating system, the soil, the atmosphere, it was still there. So life, eventually recovered.
But this time, it's entirely human-made. And the pollution isn't just an event, it's calling. It's changing the very foundations of the environment itself.
And that's where the numbers become so important. The senior expert in our source laid out these carbon thresholds, and, well, they should honestly be a wake-up call for everyone.
Let's go through them.
Okay, so for a stable climate, the kind that allowed our civilizations to flourish, you need about 240 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere.
240. Got it.
Now, here's the number for your personal health. To just be healthy, to have your body function properly, we have to stay under 340 ppm.
And if we go over that?
You start seeing immediate health problems, circulatory issues, embolisms, even links to things like Alzheimer's. The body's just not designed for it.
It's under stress. So where are we now? The sources said the last reported number was
430. 430 ppm.
Wow. So we are way past the healthy level.
Way past. And here's the real tipping point, the one that keeps scientists up at night. If we cross 450 ppm, the warming becomes effectively irreversible on a human timescale.
Meaning, even if we stopped all emissions tomorrow.
The planet would continue to warm, and cooling it down would take, well, an incredibly long time, a geologic amount of time.
And it's not just the carbon, is it? The discussion turned to synthetic poisons?
Yes. This is the other piece of the puzzle. Since about 1915, we've created something like 300,000 new chemical compounds.
And evolution hasn't caught up. Nature has no enzymes, no natural mechanisms to break these things down.
Not a one. They're totally alien. And the scale, I mean, think about this. In 1945, the entire world dumped about 1 million tons of chemical waste. Recent reports put that number at 650 million tons.
650 times more. I can't even picture that.
It's staggering. And that's why the expert makes this crucial point. We are eliminating the producer environment.
You're not just killing the current species, you're destroying the stage itself, the soil, the water, the very things new life would need to grow.
Exactly. Recovery becomes impossible, which forces us to ask, how did we not see this coming? And that leads us straight to the value of understanding evolution.
Right, because the public perception of evolution is so narrow. The expert was so frustrated with that one question he always gets.
Oh, I know the one. Did we come from monkeys?
Yes. And it completely misses the whole point of what evolution actually is.
It really does. It's not just a story about where we came from. It's a thinking system. It's a science for interpreting how things develop, how they adapt, and, most importantly, for predicting what might happen next.
And sure, the genetic link is real. We share 300 genes with apes. We have a common ancestor. But getting stuck on that, it's a distraction.
It is. The irony, as the source pointed out, is that people seem fine with the idea that we evolved from fish, but the ape connection is the one that trips them up.
So what's the real power of it? The aha moment was that story about the grasshopper.
Yes, that's it. The expert claimed that by understanding evolutionary rules, he could look at a single grasshopper.
Just one insect.
And from that one insect, he could predict the environment it came from, the elevation, the temperature swings, even the kinds of plants that grow there, all without ever going to the location.
That's incredible. It's like a diagnostic tool for the entire planet.
It is. But it also shows us that nature is not this perfect, harmonious system we imagine it to be.
Right. It's incredibly inefficient.
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
The trout example is perfect. A single trout lays 1,000,000 eggs.
Uh,
1,000,000. And on average, only 5 survive to adulthood.
just 5.
Evolution isn't planning for the future. It's just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. It creates immense diversity, and whatever happens to fit the current conditions, that's what survives for now.
And that's where the 99% rule comes in.
Exactly. 99% of all species that have ever lived are extinct. Extinction isn't the exception, it's the rule. And we humans are hardly perfect. I mean, the sources mention 9,000 hereditary diseases.
3,000 chromosome diseases. That doesn't sound like a flawless design.
Not at all. We are simply the species that is best adapted for today. Tomorrow is another question entirely.
Which makes it all the more alarming that, according to the expert, we're failing to teach this critical science correctly.
It's a complete failure of pedagogy. You can't teach biology in a sterile classroom. You just can't. It has to be taught out in the field in nature where you can actually see the mechanics at play.
And this connects to that larger problem of intellectual apathy, maybe, or a lack of humility.
Humility is the key. I love that story about the student who asked the expert a question he couldn't answer.
And he just said, I don't know.
Right. And then he took the student to his office and they looked it up in the books together. What a powerful message that sends. Knowledge isn't something he owns, it's something you seek out.
But that curiosity seems so rare. That story about the earwig was, well, it was deeply troubling.
It really was. He asks these villagers about a common insect, something they see every day.
And their response is, what will you do with that information?
Why do you care?
Yeah.
The idea that knowledge is only valuable if it has some immediate, practical, usually financial benefit, that is so dangerous.
And he connects that apathy directly to his critique of our education system, using the Gaussian curve.
This is a controversial point, but it's an important one. The system right now tries to push everyone toward a university degree.
One size fits all.
Right. But the argument is that the kind of creative, high-level intelligence needed to solve these massive global problems, well, it's only present in maybe 3 to 5% of the population.
So he's not saying education is bad. Everyone needs a solid education to live. But we're misusing our resources.
Precisely. We should be spreading general education widely, but focusing our highest level, most intense resources on identifying and training that top 3–5%. They are the ones who can drive the breakthroughs we need.
It's a resource allocation problem.
At its core, yes. And that kind of pragmatic, mechanical thinking. It really defines his whole philosophy on life.
It was fascinating how he described it. He was raised religious, but now his worldview is built on verifiable rules, physics, chemistry, biology.
He argues that trying to load meaning onto the universe is a mistake, because meaning is always colored by our own culture, our own fears.
It's subjective.
Exactly. Instead, he finds reverence, a kind of awe, just by observing the system itself.
Yeah.
The sheer complexity of the universe operating according to its rules. It's very similar to how Einstein viewed it.
Awe in the mechanics, not some hidden purpose.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that philosophy leads directly to his final advice for us, for you listening.
Okay, let's break it down. Number 1, minimize waste.
Live with minimum values. It's not a moral judgment, it's just math. Resources are finite. Rampant consumption is a dead end.
Number 2, cultivate personal curiosity.
Make it a ritual, a habit. Curiosity is the only thing that has ever advanced our society. If we lose that, we're done.
And the last one, number 3, is maybe the most actionable. Choose your circle carefully.
Actively seek out people who know things. Engage with them. And when you do, shut up and listen.
And take notes. I loved that detail, that he always carried a notebook, even at dinner, to write down things he learned from other people.
That is the definition of an examined life, isn't it? Constant learning.
So really, what this all comes down to is that evolutionary thinking isn't just about the past. It's the essential toolkit we need to navigate the future.
It's the only way to understand our own factory settings, the rules of the game we're playing. It's the only path forward.
A path that seems to be getting narrower.
Which brings me to a final question for you to think about. If adaptation is the fundamental rule of life, and we are actively making our environment harsher, what will we have to sacrifice?
What do you mean?
I mean, what comforts, what traditions, what level of consumption will we have to give up to ensure that humanity remains the species that fits the new, more brutal conditions we're creating for ourselves?
That is a question to sit with. Thank you for walking us through these sources, and thank you for your time.
Until our next one.
I know I can love you.